My name is Jake, an investigative journalist specializing in podcasts about mysterious disappearances. Before this story began, I used to think I knew what fear was, but I was wrong. Wrong to the point where there are no words left to describe it. The story begins on an autumn evening in the small town of Stillwater, at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. I was sitting in a rundown bar called The Bear's Tooth, with Sarah, an anthropologist, with Tom, a former Marine with a long scar running from his temple down to his chin, and Chloe, a reckless YouTuber. An old Blackfoot man walked into the bar. No one saw him come through the door, as if he had been there all along, and we just hadn't noticed. He sat down at the table across from us, his milky white eyes staring straight at me. His voice was raspy, like dry leaves crumbling. "You're looking for the 5 streams. Don't do it. 217 people have disappeared there." But the scariest thing isn't that they vanished. The scariest thing is that they're still there, under the water, and they can still see us. Chloe laughed loudly, turning on her phone to record. The old man turned to look at her, and I saw what would haunt me for days afterward. His milky white eyes suddenly had pupils. But the pupils weren't round. They were vertical slits, like a snake's eyes. He said, "Little girl, you will be the first. You will die first. Then the soldier, then the educated girl, and finally the journalist. You will die in that exact order." He placed a goatskin map on the table. On it were 5 red circles and a line of text written in a language no one could read anymore. Sarah translated. "The water remembers your name. It will call your name 3 times. The first time, you hear it. The second time, you answer. The third time, you go down." The old man stood up and walked toward the door. But as he stepped through the doorway, I saw it clearly. He had no shadow. And beneath his shoes, water was seeping out. Black water, rotten water, the same kind I would see at the 5 streams. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. I thought I was just tired. We set off at dawn. Tom drove, Chloe filmed, Sarah researched on her phone, and I sat by the window. The first thing I noticed was that the car radio wouldn't pick up any station. There was only one sound. The sound of running water. Not one stream. Hundreds of streams. Thousands of streams. All flowing at once, blending with distant weeping. I looked out the window. The sky was clear blue, not a cloud in sight. But the road ahead wasn't dry. It was wet. Wet as if it had just rained, even though it hadn't. Tom turned onto a dirt trail leading into the forest. The deeper we went, the wetter the road became. And then I began to see footprints. Hundreds of footprints pressed into the mud, but all facing one direction, into the forest. There were no footprints coming back out. I told Tom to stop the car. I got out, crouched down, and examined one footprint. The print was deep, as if the person who made it was 3 times heavier than normal. And inside the print, black water was slowly seeping up from the ground. I touched it. The water was freezing cold, but when I pulled my hand back, my fingertips were burning. Not cold. It was so cold that my body thought it was burning. It felt like touching boiling water, but the water was cold. I got back in the car without a word. We kept driving. By noon, we stopped at a clearing less than a kilometer from Weeping Creek. And when I stepped out of the car, I smelled it. The stench of rotting meat, of corpses left in the sun, of something that had died a long time ago but never fully decomposed. Tom said, "That's the smell of the creek." It was the smell of death. We reached Weeping Creek at 3 in the afternoon. I will never forget the sight. The creek was about 10 meters wide, the water pitch black like India ink, the surface as still as a sheet of glass. But the strangest thing wasn't the color of the water. The strangest thing was the trees. All the trees along the creek were dead. Their bark had peeled off in patches, exposing the wood beneath. And on that wood, there were faces, not natural grain patterns, but human faces, crudely carved as if someone had clawed them out with fingernails. Hundreds of faces, children, old people, men, women, all with mouths open, all with eyes closed, and they all looked exactly alike. They all looked like Chloe. Chloe ran toward the creek, filming as she went. "See, guys? The faces on the trees look just like me. How funny!" I ran after her and grabbed her arm, but when my hand touched Chloe's skin, I felt that it was wet. Wet as if she had just come out of the water. But Chloe had never gone into the water. I asked, "Why are you wet?" Chloe looked down at her arm, then at me, bewildered. "I'm not wet. I don't see any wetness." I looked at my own hand. It was dry. But I swear I had just felt water. I swear something cold and wet was clinging to my skin. Tom came over and told us to step back from the bank. He took a long stick and poked it into the water. The stick was 2 meters long. Tom pushed it all the way to the handle. The stick didn't touch bottom. Tom tried a 3-meter pole. Still no bottom. How deep was this creek supposed to be? According to the map, it was at most 1.5 meters deep. Tom pulled the pole out. The end had vanished. Not broken, not rotted. It had vanished, as if something under the water had cut it with an invisible blade. The cut surface was as smooth as glass. We looked at each other, no one speaking. The air suddenly grew heavy, as if someone was pressing down on our shoulders. That night, we set up camp 300 meters from the creek. I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to the wind blowing through the dead trees. But it wasn't the wind. It was whispering, hundreds, thousands of voices whispering at once, not in words, but in formless sounds that invaded my ears and crawled into my brain, and every whisper called my name. Jake, Jake, Jake. I looked toward the neighboring tent. Chloe's tent was open. In the pale moonlight, I saw Chloe sitting on her sleeping mat, eyes wide open, lips moving silently. But she wasn't speaking, she was just mouthing. And every time her lips met, a drop of black water fell from the corner of her mouth. Then 2 drops, then a stream. Water flowed from Chloe's mouth down her chin, down her neck, down her chest. She sat motionless, unresponsive, eyes still open, lips still moving. I called out, "Chloe." She didn't answer. I stepped into her tent and shook her. She fell over like a log. And when she fell, her mouth gaped open. Inside Chloe's mouth, there was no tongue, no teeth, no palate, just a black, bottomless hole. And from that hole, water poured out, black, cold, rotten water. It flooded the tent, soaking the mat, soaking the sleeping bag. I stumbled back, screaming for Tom and Sarah. Tom and Sarah ran over. They looked at Chloe, at the black water streaming from her mouth. Tom tried to force her mouth shut, but it wouldn't close. It was stiff, frozen open at an unnatural width. Tom stuffed a piece of cloth into her mouth to stop the water. The cloth disappeared. It fell into that black hole and never came back. Then Chloe stood up. She stood without using her hands, without pushing off the ground. She jerked upright like a puppet whose strings were pulled. Her eyes were wide, the irises gone, replaced by milky white. She turned her head to look at each of us. The head turned slowly, but her body did not follow. The head turned a full 180 degrees. I heard the bones of her neck crackle. Chloe smiled. Her mouth was still open, but the smile showed in her eyes. Those milky white eyes curved upward into 2 crescent moons. She spoke in a voice that was not her own, a low, raspy voice that vibrated like a bullfrog at the bottom of a well. "It begins. The first one. I will take her down. Watch closely." Chloe spun around and bolted out of the tent. We chased after her. She ran toward the creek, so fast that her feet barely seemed to touch the ground. I saw it clearly. With every step Chloe took, a splash of black water burst up from the ground like a flower. She ran straight into the creek, stopping in the middle of the black water. It rose to her knees. Then she slowly began to sink. Not drown, sink, as if there was a giant drain at the bottom of the creek. The water rose to her waist, to her chest, to her neck. I waded in, trying to grab her. But when I touched Chloe's shoulder, it was soft, soft as wet dough. My fingers went through her skin and touched something cold and hard inside. Bone. But her bones had already turned black. And on the bones, words were carved. My name, Tom's name, Sarah's name, hundreds of names, carved densely on the skeleton that was slowly sinking. Chloe smiled one last time. The water reached her mouth. She said, "See you later." Then the water covered her nose, her eyes, her hair. She vanished. The black water returned to its flat, glassy stillness. No bubbles, no ripples, as if Chloe had never existed. I stood in the water, shaking from cold and fear. Sarah pulled me back to the bank. Tom shone his flashlight down at the water. In the beam, about a meter deep, I saw Chloe's face, but it was no longer the face of a living person. It was already decomposing. Skin peeled off in strips, revealing the muscle beneath. And that muscle too was decomposing, revealing the bone. The entire process of decay happened within seconds. And when all that remained was a black skeleton, that skeleton smiled at me. Its jaw clicked. "The soldier is next." I turned to Tom. Tom stood frozen, his face ashen. His hand holding the flashlight trembled violently. And on Tom's neck, I saw a bruise in the shape of a small hand, the hand of a child. We drove to Trinity Alps, California, in silence. Sarah said nothing. Tom said nothing. Neither did I. Chloe was dead. We knew who would be next. The old man had been right about the order. Chloe first, then the soldier. Tom was the soldier. On the way, I glanced into the rearview mirror. In the back seat, where Chloe used to sit, there was now an empty spot, but not completely empty. A puddle of black water had pooled on the seat. And in that puddle, Chloe's face was reflected. Not Chloe alive, Chloe dead. Gray skin, sunken black ringed eyes, lips sewn shut with black thread. That face stared at me, and the sewn lips burst their stitches one by one, opening into a smile. I turned away, too afraid to look any longer. Turning Stones Creek lay deep in a dark canyon. The water here was crystal clear, but not ordinary clear. It was so clear, you could see every pebble on the bottom. Except there were no pebbles. The bottom was made entirely of bones, human bones, stacked neatly in layers, like bricks paving a road. And the stones, hundreds of large and small stones scattered along the creek bed and the banks. Tom warned, "Don't stare at them too long." I asked why. Tom pointed to a round stone about 10 meters away. "Look at it." I looked. It was an ordinary gray stone covered in moss. I stared for 10 seconds. Then I looked away. When I looked back, the stone had moved 5 meters. And it was no longer a stone. It was a head, a giant human head made of stone, eyes wide open, mouth agape. From inside that stone mouth, water flowed, not from the creek, but from inside the head. Tom said, "They're not stones. They're the people who died here. They were turned into stone. But they're still alive. They can still see us. They're still hungry." We set up camp on a high mound, far from the creek. But the farther we moved from the creek, the closer the stones came. I swear they moved, not rolling, but sliding across the ground as if they had legs. And as they moved, they made a sound, a moaning sound, the sound of people being slowly crushed. Around midnight, I woke to Tom's screams. I ran to his tent. Tom was sitting on his mat, clutching his head, staring at a corner of the tent. I followed his gaze. In the corner, a dark shadow. Not an ordinary shadow. It had the shape of a man, but its body was stretched out, its limbs bent at unnatural angles. That shadow crawled along the tent wall, slowly moving toward Tom. I cut the tent wall with my knife, letting in the moonlight. The shadow vanished, but Tom kept screaming. He pointed at his wrist. On Tom's wrist, his 10-year-old watch was running backward, and on the watch face, instead of numbers, there were names. The names of the soldiers in his unit. Dozens of names. And the last name at the 12 o'clock position was Tom's own name. It glowed red. Tom said, "They're calling me. I have to go down." I tried to hold Tom back, but Tom was stronger than me. He shoved me to the ground, ran out of the tent, and charged straight for the creek. Sarah ran after him. I ran too. Tom was already wading into the middle of the creek, the crystal clear water so transparent that I could see his feet standing on those layers of bone. Tom stopped, staring down into the water. I shouted, "Tom, come back!" Tom didn't answer. He bent down and picked something out of the water. When he straightened up, he was holding a skull. The skull still had hair attached, blonde hair, Chloe's hair. Tom cradled the skull in his arms, whispering, "Chloe told me to come down. Chloe said my whole unit is down here. I have to go down." Then, Tom began to sink. Not slowly. He was sucked down as if a giant hand from the bottom was pulling him. The water swirled around him. The stones spun into a vortex. I waded out and grabbed Tom's arm. His arm was ice cold, and I felt beneath his skin that his bones were shattering. One vertebra after another breaking, as if someone was crushing them from the inside. Tom screamed in agony, but no sound came from his mouth. The sound came from his bones, crackling, popping, like crunchy candy being chewed. Sarah waded in and pulled at me. I pulled at Tom, but Tom was too heavy. Actually, Tom was normal weight, but something under the water was holding him. I looked down. Beneath the clear water, I saw hundreds of hands, pale white hands with long blackened fingernails, gripping Tom's ankles, his pants, every fiber of his flesh. They pulled hard. I couldn't resist. Tom looked at me. His eyes had turned completely black. He said, "Let me go. I'm going back to them. That's an order. I can't disobey an order." I let go. Tom sank. The swirling water pulled him down. The stones realigned into a circle, and at the center of the circle, a giant mouth opened. That mouth had teeth, hundreds of thousands of teeth, arranged in concentric rings, like the mouth of a giant sea lamprey. That mouth swallowed Tom, swallowed him whole. And when Tom was gone, the water returned to its crystal clarity, the stones returned to their original positions, and the bones on the bottom lay still. I sat by the creek bank, tears streaming down my face, but my tears were not salty, they were black. I wiped my cheek and looked at my hand, black tears. The blood in my veins had already begun to turn black. Sarah came to me and held me. She was crying too. Her tears were also black. We looked at each other, and we knew that something inside us had died long ago, long before our bodies would die. The third creek, Mist Hollow Creek, lay in Olympic National Forest, Washington. It was the creek where Tom had nearly died 10 years ago. Now Tom was truly dead. Only Sarah and I remained. We drove through the night, saying nothing. The radio still played only the sound of flowing water. In the back seat there were now 2 puddles of black water. One for Chloe, one for Tom. The 2 puddles spread, merged into one larger puddle. And in that puddle, I saw 2 faces. Not just Chloe and Tom, but other faces as well. Hundreds of faces, staring at us from beneath the black water on the back seat. We reached Mist Hollow Creek at dawn. The sun hadn't fully risen, but I could already see the mist. It rose from the creek bed, thick, white, billowing like smoke from an underground fire. But it wasn't smoke. Smoke rises, but this mist spread outward, crawling across the ground like a living thing. It crawled toward us, covering our feet, our ankles, our knees. When the mist touched my skin, I felt a burning heat, but it wasn't heat. It was cold. So cold that my body thought it was being burned. Sarah screamed. She pointed at her legs. Beneath the mist, her feet were changing. The skin on her legs began to crack open, and from those cracks, a milky white fluid seeped out. Not blood, it was bone marrow. The shin bones of Sarah's legs had shattered, and the marrow was leaking out through the cracks in her skin. Sarah collapsed in pain and rolled out of the mist. I dragged her onto a high rock where the mist hadn't yet reached. I tried to bandage Sarah's legs, but there was no way to bandage wounds where the skin split open from the inside. Sarah shivered, her teeth chattering. She said, "Jake, do you see? There are people in the mist." I looked into the thick white fog. At first I saw nothing, just white. Then slowly, shapes began to appear. They walked through the mist, but not on feet. They glided across the ground as if they had no legs at all. As they came closer, I saw them clearly. They had no faces. Where faces should have been, there was only smooth, pale skin, without eyes, nose, or mouth. But on that smooth skin, there were tiny mouths, scattered everywhere like pores. Hundreds of tiny mouths on each blank face, all whispering in unison, "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah." Sarah stood up, forgetting her pain. She walked toward those faceless shapes. I grabbed her and pulled her back. She struggled, eyes wide, lips mumbling, "Daddy, Daddy." One of the faceless shapes stepped forward, stopping in front of Sarah. It was taller than the others. And on its smooth white face, the tiny mouths began to sing a lullaby. In the voice of Sarah's father, that voice came from hundreds of tiny mouths on a face without eyes. Sarah wept, saying, "Daddy told me to come down. Daddy said if it hurts too much, I should come down to him." I couldn't hold Sarah any longer. She broke free and ran toward the faceless shapes. They opened their circle and welcomed her in. Sarah stood among them, turned to look at me, and smiled. And as she smiled, the skin of her face began to fall off, pieces of skin peeling away, dropping into the mist. Beneath the skin, there was no flesh, no bone, only a dark void, shimmering like water. Sarah dissolved, blending into the mist, blending into the faceless figures, and I stood there, helpless. The mist began to lift, the sun rose, the faceless shapes vanished. Sarah was gone. On the rock where she had been sitting, only her shoes remained. Inside the shoes, black water pooled. And in that black water, I saw my own face reflected. That face smiled. It said, "Now you're alone. Your turn is coming." I was alone. I drove to Echo Creek in Palo Duro Canyon, Texas. The back seat now held 3 puddles of black water. Chloe, Tom, Sarah. They had spread until they covered almost the entire seat. In each puddle, faces stared at me, not just the 3 of them, but hundreds of others. All the people who had died at the 5 streams. They stared at me, their lips moving, but I could hear nothing. My car was silent. The radio was off. The recorder was off. Even the engine made no sound. The car still moved, but it produced no noise at all. I drove in absolute silence, with those underwater faces watching me. Echo Creek had no water. That's right. When I arrived, the creek bed was dry. Only rocks, sand, and bones. But I could still hear the sound of flowing water. It came from beneath the ground, from the cracks, from the sky, from inside my head. It echoed everywhere. Echo Creek was the creek of echoes, but not echoes of sound, echoes of souls. I stepped into the dry creek bed. The sand under my feet was soft, as if there was groundwater below. With each step, the sand sucked my foot in a little deeper. When I reached the middle of the creek bed, I stopped. Around me, the rocks began to speak, not with words, but with images. Each rock projected an image, like a screen. I saw Chloe sinking into the black water. I saw Tom being crushed by the stones. I saw Sarah dissolving into the white mist. I saw myself, standing here, alone. Then the rocks showed other images. A man wearing a gold miner's outfit, standing at the edge of Stillwater Creek, staring down at the black water. Under the water, a woman holding a baby wept and begged. The man turned his back and walked away. The woman and the child sank. The man grew old, died, and his body was thrown into the creek. And his soul became trapped, transformed into me, into Jake, into the wanderer who endlessly seeks the 5 streams, lifetime after lifetime. I am not Jake. I have never been Jake. Jake is the name the creek gave me for this reincarnation. Before this, I was Thomas, I was Elizabeth, I was a 10-year-old child, I was a 70-year-old man. All of them were me. All of us were trapped souls, endlessly living again, coming to the 5 streams, losing our friends, realizing the truth, and dying, repeating, forever. I knelt in the dry creek bed, and the sand sucked at my knees. I wept, but my tears were black. I screamed, but no sound came out. I struck the sand with my fist, and the sand parted. Beneath the sand, there was no rock. There was water, black water. And in that black water, every face I had ever seen, ever loved, ever lost, was there. They waved at me, calling. They said, "One more creek, Jake, the last creek. There you will have a choice. Either stay with us forever, or find someone else to take your place. But you have no one left to replace you. All your friends are already dead." I stood up, walked out of the dry creek bed, got into my car, and drove toward Georgia, toward Stillwater Creek. The final creek, where it all began, where it all ends. Okefenokee Swamp, Georgia. A dead land, withered trees, not a single bird, not a single mosquito. I paddled my boat alone, threading between black cypress stumps with roots jutting up like bony arms. The swamp water was pitch black, flat as a sheet of glass, not a ripple, not a bubble. Occasionally, I would see rings spreading across the surface, as if something had just touched it, but there was nothing there. After 3 hours of paddling, I reached a wide stretch of open water. At the center, the water was perfectly still. I knew I had arrived at Stillwater Creek. I tied my boat to a dead tree and sat still. Dusk fell. The moon rose. The moonlight hit the black water but was not reflected. The black water drank the light, giving nothing back. I waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Then I saw it. From the bottom of the creek, a hand rose. A pale white hand, 5 fingers too long, nails black and rotten. It rose to the surface, touched it, and the water froze around the hand. The hand pushed upward, and an arm emerged, then a shoulder, then a head. A head without skin, only muscle and sinew, dark red, glistening like raw meat. Its eyes were 2 black sockets, but within those sockets, I saw light, a greenish light, pulsing with my own heartbeat. That entity slowly stood up on the surface of the water, as if standing on solid ground. It was about 2 meters tall. its entire body naked, skinless, hairless, and it walked toward me. At each step, the water beneath its feet froze, then melted, then froze again. The sound of its footsteps was the sound of bones breaking, flesh tearing, water boiling. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, not by cold, but by primal fear, the kind of fear that humans lost when they invented electricity and guns. The entity stopped in front of me. It bent down, its skinless face inches from mine. I smelled its odor, the stench of rotting flesh, dried blood, the smell of thousands of years of death. It opened its mouth. No lips, only teeth. Hundreds of teeth growing over one another, yellowed, blackened. From that mouth, a voice emerged, the voice of everyone who had ever died, blended into a single hellish chord. Jake, you have come. You have seen 4 creeks. You have lost your friends. You have realized who you are. Now, do you want to escape? I nodded, my lips trembling. The entity laughed. Its laughter was the sound of thousands of children laughing at once, but in a lower register, deeper, more terrifying. It said, "There are 2 ways. The first way, you find someone else, bring them here, and let them take your place. You will be free. You will escape the loop. But do you have anyone to bring? Your friends are all dead. Your family died long ago. You are very alone, Jake. You have always been alone." I was silent. It continued. "The second way, you stay. You merge with us. You become part of the creek. You will live down there with thousands of other souls. You will never grow old, never die, but you will never truly live. You will merely exist. And every night, you will call out to those who come near. You will pull them down. You will watch them die. You will see their faces when they realize the truth, and you will be unable to do anything else." I looked at the entity and asked, "Is there another way?" It was silent for a long time. Then it said, "Yes, the third way. You stay, but you do not merge with us. You stand on the threshold. You become the storyteller. You tell those who come after about the 5 streams. You warn them, but will they listen? Do you remember, when you were alive, you were warned. The old man in the bar told you not to go. Did you listen?" "No, you didn't listen, because humans never listen. They only learn through pain. They only believe when they see, and when they see, it is already too late." I understood. I understood everything. I could not escape. I could not replace myself. I could not save anyone. But I could tell the story. I could tell this story to anyone who would listen. And perhaps, just perhaps, someone out there, someone who truly listens, would turn back before it was too late. I looked at the entity and nodded. I said, "I choose the third way. I will tell." The entity bowed its head. It reached into its own chest and pulled out a heart. Not a heart of muscle, a heart of water. Black water, frozen solid, shaped like a heart. It handed it to me. I took it. That frozen heart melted in my hands, soaked into my skin, into my blood, and I knew I was no longer human. I was a soul that could walk between the world of the living and the world under the water. A soul that could see the 5 streams from every angle. A soul that could tell this story forever. The entity stepped back, slowly sinking into the black water. Before it vanished completely, it said, "Tell the story, Jake. Tell it to all of them. But do not hope that anyone will listen. Because humans do not change. Humans will keep coming. And we will still be here, hungry forever, waiting forever." The water froze, then melted, then returned to its glassy stillness. I stood in my boat, looking down into the black water. Beneath it, thousands of faces looked back up at me. Among them, I saw Chloe, Tom, Sarah. They smiled at me. They waved. They were not sad. They had accepted it. And now, it was my turn to accept. I am Jake. I am dead. I have never been alive. I am only a wandering soul, trapped among the 5 streams. And now, I tell this story to you. You are listening. You are curious. You are wondering whether these streams are real, where they are, how to find them. Don't look for them. I beg you, don't look. But if you refuse to listen, at least remember this. When you stand at the edge of any stream at all, and you hear a voice calling your name from beneath the water, do not answer. Do not look down. Do not breathe. Turn your back and run. Run as fast as you can. Never look back. Because if you look back, you will see me. I will be down there, smiling at you, waving for you, and you will step down. I know you will step down, because humans always step down. It is your nature. You are curious. You want to know. You want to touch death to see if it is real. It is real. And it is waiting under the 5 streams. It is always waiting. And now, I must go. They are calling me. Listen, they are calling my name. Jake, Jake, Jake. The first time, the second time, the third time. I am going down. See you there.